What happens overnight when it's below freezing with kale? The plant, the foliage, which is the leaves that you like, right? They can handle being frozen and thawed, and they freeze and become very brittle, and then they thaw out and recover during the day if the day is above zero. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I thought I'd do a short video here talking about kale, plants like kale, you know, cole crops, crucifers, that category, brassicas, and the ones that are cold hardy that you can leave out in the fall, and how long you can leave them out, and at what point I make the decision to bring them in. So here I've got some Siberian kale, I guess. It's like red Russian kale, same idea, just not red, but a very, you know, very similar to more wild versions of kale. It's got a more, it's got more flavor, I think, than Scotch curly kale, for instance. A bit more of a mustardy sort of, not too much, just a hint of, right? Anyway, so here I got some of this growing, and this time of year, it's December, it's early December, first week of December. It's the end of the first week of December, I guess. It's like almost the middle of December, okay? I think it's December 11th today, and I think. And the soil is starting to freeze at night and thaw during the day. We're getting, you know, temperatures that are, we're getting freezing temperatures at night on a fairly regular basis. We get the odd warm day because I live in Nova Scotia. I'm pretty close to the ocean here, so a lot of warm breezes can come up the Gulf and, you know, dramatically thaw things out on a given day. The temperature is very unstable here, but generally speaking, it's starting to feel and look like winter. Yesterday, the day before that, everything was covered in snow in the morning. Now all the snow is gone, but it's starting to be very wintry, and the ground is starting to freeze. And this is around the time when I just, whatever kale I still have in the garden, instead of using the cut and come again method where I take a, you know, take a leaf here or there, I just cut the whole plant off and take the whole thing in. And you know, I'm trying to use it all up because what happens overnight when it's below freezing with kale? The plant, the foliage, which is the leaves that you like, right? They can handle being frozen and thawed, and they freeze and become very brittle, and then they thaw out and recover during the day if the day is above zero. So they're doing that. The plants aren't really growing this time of year, right? They're just sort of surviving, hanging on, existing, right? They're not really, you know, there's no real new, you know, they're not putting on new growth. If there is any growing, it's happening at an unbelievably slow rate. I mean, we're about 2 weeks away from the shortest day of the year. It's very cold, so the plants need sunlight and heat to grow. They're getting neither right now. So they're really not growing, they're just existing. So I'm using the garden like a big refrigerator to just store my kale. Most of my kale has been picked, harvested, and frozen and put in the freezer. And I got videos on how to do that. If you just take a look at storing kale, just do a little search on my channel. But this is the time of year I start bringing it all in. It's a great time of year because the kale tastes really good, but you start running the risk of having the kale not shrug off the cold because, and I haven't read this anywhere, this is just an observation of mine, and if anyone out there is a biologist, they can disagree with me, but what happens at night is that it gets very cold, it gets to zero. When you come out in the morning, it's above zero right now. The ground, there's a bit of frost in the ground, but anyway, what happens at night is that the leaves just go down like that. And then, you know, if it gets above zero, they sort of pick back up again. So there's lots of mornings I come up, and these are laid down a little bit right now. The plants are going to be a bit more erect as the day goes on. The sun's supposed to come out. It's supposed to go up, you know, I think it's a high of 2 degrees Celsius today. Not the warmest day in the world, but it's going to be above zero, and it's going to be, you know, relatively nice. Anyway, these plants will come up a little bit. And there's some mornings I've come up when it's been like, if I come out here at like if I come out here in the morning and it's below zero, like -2, -3, these are practically on the ground. And then they come back up, right? Anyway, once the ground freezes, which is starting to do right now, okay? The ground right now it's frozen down about 1/2 inch right now. So it's got that sort of heaved, frosty look in the ground. So the ground's not frozen yet, but it's going to be frozen soon. What happens is when that starts happening, the plants just cannot, they start losing their ability to draw water up out of the soil. you know, inevitably because the soil's frozen and the water can't be drawn out of it. But yeah, the colder and colder it gets, the plant's roots just lose their ability to rehydrate the plant. And so the plant starts looking very sunburned, even though you're getting really short days and not a lot of sun. It just gets this, the leaves become white, and they just don't recover from being frozen and thawed because the plant can't rehydrate itself. The plant becomes dehydrated as it gets colder and colder and colder. So, you know, there's been years where I've been a bit lackadaisical and just kept leaving things out, because it's really nice still having, you know, last night I came home from work got home around 5 o'clock, went out in the backyard, you know, I cut off a head of kale and brought it in. We had fresh kale with our supper, and this time of year the kale tastes so good. But, you know, it's getting to the point in the year where, you know, if we keep having these cold nights, you can see, I don't have a lot of good examples of it here right now, but you'll get, the foliage will just, yeah, I don't think I've got any, it just hasn't been that cold lately. But the foliage will start to yellow and almost turn white a little bit. And it's a combination of it being not just cold, but kind of like super cold, right? So it kills the leaves. So when, you know, when that starts happening, that's when it's time to bring your kale in. Just cut it all, bring it in, and you know, blanch and freeze it. I know lots of my viewers say they don't bother blanching it. That's just a question of taste. I think if you read any sort of literature in the culinary vein, they recommend blanching it in boiling salt water for a minute or two and freezing, and that just preserves taste, texture, and color better than simply chopping it up and put it in the freezer. Yeah, you can chop it up and put it in the freezer, but when you blanch it, it actually shrinks, so it doesn't take as much space in your freezer, and it just does a much better job. I think if you know, did a taste test and you had 1,000 people and they had blanched and frozen kale and just frozen kale that was never blanched, I think they would probably prefer the blanched, you know, the one that was boiled in salted water and blanched for a minute or two. Because, you know, I don't think you're going to find a recognized culinary expert doing anything other than recommending that. So that's what I would do. And that's kind of when I'm, you know, I think I still have another week, you know, but I have too much kale out here in the garden to leave out. We're not going to use this all up. I've got, look over here. So man, the only kale I have left in the garden is these plants. This is enough for one meal, that's it. The ones over here. But over here, I've got the last of my winter boar kale. Each of those heads is a meal, right? You know, by meal I mean like the vegetable side dish that would accompany a meal, right? A mess of greens, as I like to say, on the side. They kind of look like trees, right? So really, this week, maybe even this weekend, I got to cut all of these off and put them away so that we can have them in the winter months. Because, you know, at some point, I'm going to start losing the good stuff, right? So yeah, I might do that tomorrow, or I might wait another week and see what happens. This one seems to be a bit tougher. This winter boar kale, maybe that's why they call it winter boar kale, seems to be a bit tougher in terms of its ability to handle cold weather. I notice on particularly cold nights, this one is just flattened right out. The plants look dead. And then, you know, if the sun comes out and the day warms up, the plant picks up and kind of looks the way it does now. And, you know, I've been harvesting these a lot. These were as big as the other ones, you know, a couple months ago. I've just been going crazy with those because I know they can't take the cold as well as these. So I'm inclined to, I'm saying I'm going to bring them in tomorrow, but I might change my mind because it is just nice having them out here. But these ones seem to be able to, I don't know why, it's just, you know, they have a different chemistry, a different, you know, they're just different in some way. They seem to take the cold better than the Siberian kale, which is funny given that it's called Siberian, but anyway. So just some random ramblings about kale and how long you can leave it in your garden. You know, it really depends on where you live and how severe your winter is and all that sort of stuff. I mean, our winter just, you know, it's almost the middle of December now, and our winter just gets colder and colder and colder until, you know, March, and then it starts to, you know, ease up a bit. Although some Marches are unbelievable, but so you know, if you have a mild winter, sure, you can leave it out, right? But we don't have a mild winter here. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And we start getting those nights, you know, it's just consistently below zero. The ground freezes. The kale can't live in that situation. It's not, I mean, the kale right now is kind of semi-dormant in a sense, I suppose. But once it starts getting really cold, the foliage all dies. You're just going to lose it anyway. So, you know, that's when it's time to pull the plug. And for me, for where I am, we're getting to that point. Mid-December tends to be, you know, every year is different, but mid-December tends to be the point where it's just time to stop believing, give up the dream, man. You don't have a garden anymore. It's winter. Winter's coming, right? So, you know, it's time to get in the winter mode. So, I hope you found that interesting and gave you some, if you're a new gardener, gave you some, you know, maybe you've been enjoying having your kale out if you live somewhere relatively temperate like me. But yeah, it's about time to think about if it's freezing every night, if the temperature's going below zero every night, it's time to start thinking about just bringing it all in and finding some way to store it so you can continue to enjoy it for as long as possible and get the most out of all that wonderful stuff you grew. I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.